University is a small university on the West Bank in Bethlehem itself. And what I want to talk about is what makes Bethlehem University special, and that is the people. One of the reasons the Palestinian Christians asked the Pope Paul VI for a university was that there were no universities in the Holy Land at all in the West Bank. So anybody wanting an education had to leave Palestine. Now they were leaving immediately after secondary school, and probably the majority weren't coming back. And so they were getting concerned about the drift of Christians out of Palestine. So one of the reasons for Bethlehem University coming into existence was to provide an education for Christians so that they would stay in Palestine. Because if you go back probably 20 or 30 years, there were probably between 18 and 20% of the population are Christian. Now it's less than 2%, about 1.7%. One of the real issues that we have is getting qualified faculty, and one of the things we are doing is trying to do what we call growing our own, taking our own graduates, getting them a qualification, some other university, and then bringing them back. 70% of our students are Muslims, 30% Christian, and I think one of the real contributions we make is the dialogue between Christians and Muslims. All of our students are required to take a course in religious studies, and in that course they look at Judaism, Christianity and Islam, and they do it together. And I think that is one of the real benefits of the course. In secondary school, you know, obviously there are more Muslims than Christians, but the Muslims go off and study the Quran, the Christians go off and study the Bible or whatever. We require them to take this study together. And I've had Muslims say to me, "Oh, I didn't realise that what Christians believed and the opposite for Muslims." Oh. And I hope it's not a naive hope. My hope is that as a result of being there together at Bethlehem University and coming to understand one another, that they're going to go back into their communities and help to undermine some of the prejudices that exist there. The suicide bombings were dastardly acts. You know, there's no question in my mind that that is not a way to respond. But you have to ask, why would people go to those extremes? From a cultural point of view, the Palestinian men, and Palestinian Muslim men in particular, place a high regard on the respect that their children have for them. And I've seen Muslim men while their children have been watching them, being humiliated by Israeli soldiers who are young enough to be their children. And so as I watch that, I wonder, you know, how are they feeling? What's going on inside them when that continues to happen time after time after time? And so, you know, I can understand why there's so much frustration and so much anger that they can explode, you know, and just want to rip the Israelis apart. So I suppose one of the things that amazes me is the restraint of the Palestinians, you know, that despite the way they are treated, it's only occasionally, and it's only a few radicals really that do respond in a violent way. But you know, it's not something that I approve, and I'd have to say in the 2 years I've been there, I've heard of violence in Jerusalem and then certainly down in Gaza. For me, I have not experienced anything in the 2 years I've been there that has caused me to be afraid at all. I find the Palestinian people incredibly gracious and just incredibly welcoming and almost overwhelming in their hospitality. And then on the 28th of October in 2009, she was coming back from Ramallah to Bethlehem in Palestine. Okay, I want to emphasize that she never ever left Palestine. And she was stopped at an Israeli checkpoint in Palestine, and they saw the word Gaza on her ID. They detained her for 7 hours, then they blindfolded her, handcuffed her, and dumped her back in Gaza in the middle of the night. The wall is the most dominant physical thing, you know, the presence of that wall, and you know, we can see it from Bethlehem University, and it's only a few hundred meters from us. So that's a physical symbol of the restrictions under which the students live. The restrictions are, say, on getting permissions are not as obvious, but they are equally as dominant. But say, if I can just take the instance of a student from East Jerusalem, for example, who comes through the wall to Bethlehem University. We have about 20% of our students come from East Jerusalem. I was talking to one at the end of the last academic year, just before she graduated, and asking her, what's it like being a student at Bethlehem University and coming from East Jerusalem? And she mentioned some wonderful things about Bethlehem University, which I was pleased about, but then she said the worst part is coming in the bus up to the checkpoint and wondering this time what's going to happen. You know, is a soldier going to get on and just look at their IDs? Is a soldier going to get on and take all their IDs and have them sit there for an hour and a half while they check them? They're going to be herded off the bus and made to stand in the sun while that happens. Are they going to be individually strip searched? Are they going to be individually interrogated? All of those things have happened to her. So when she's coming in the bus up to the checkpoint, she's wondering, this time, what's it going to be? So in the midst of all this, Bethlehem University exists. So what are we on? We're committed to the service of the Palestinian people through education. We want people who come there to feel that they've come to a place where they can feel safe, where they know that people are concerned about them. By keeping our numbers to about 3,000, it's possible for individual faculties to have a close relationship with students. So we want to keep that sense of feeling safe and being cared about. And so we talk about it as being an oasis of peace for these young people, that in the conflict that they are part of and in the restrictions that they're enduring, that when they come to Bethlehem University, they are in that oasis of peace. The other thing is that because of the history the Palestinians have endured, it's very easy for them to have a sense of being forgotten about and what's going to happen and whatever. So one of our real challenges is to keep hope alive. And so we want, and we're working on being a beacon of hope for these young people. Now, I'm very aware of the complexity of the situation. But in the 2 years I've been there, one of the conclusions I've come to is that nothing really significant is going to happen while the Americans are supporting Israel in the way that they are. As long as the United States continues to give $7 to $8 million a day to Israel, as long as it provides $2.7 billion in military aid, why would Israel want to change? Okay, so I'm not at all optimistic about that. However, I am hopeful. I have a deep hope that, a sense of hope that we will have peace in Palestine. And it's based on the fact that, I'm a man of faith, and therefore I believe that the Spirit is working. And just as I look back in history over the last 40 years, if we'd been having this conversation, say 40 years ago, I would have said I could not see how it was possible to have peace in Northern Ireland, in South Africa, or in Germany. And yet somehow, beyond my understanding, that happened. And my hope is based on the fact that if it happened there, it can happen in Palestine and Israel. And I think that if we don't have hope, if we don't hold on, if we don't believe that God's working there somehow, then we just give up. And because I've got that hope, I think what's going to be needed when peace does come is that we need Palestinians who are educated, who are resourceful, who are creative. Because that's what's going to be needed when the new Palestine comes about. And I think that Bethlehem University is making a huge contribution to create that pool of people that are going to make the new Palestine.